So here's a bonus book special for you, and in it we're going to imagine the continued career of Richard Bachman. Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Dave Musson, at Dave Musson on Instagram, and this is a place where I talk to you about all things Stephen King. And this is another book special. Now, if you're a regular around here, you might be thinking, but Dave, you already did this month's book special last week. Well, that is true, and you can go and check that out. But my brain just wouldn't let me end a month by starting a new decade. So I'm doing a second book special. It's as simple as that. And as you already know from the intro, this is a Backman book special. Specifically, we're going to take the sliding doors moment of Stephen King being discovered to be Richard Bachman in 1985 and erase that from history. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look through the rest of Stephen King's bibliography and try and guess which of those might have stayed as a Richard Bachman property. So that's what we're doing in this special. A couple of quick things to plug. Obviously there's my quiz book, which I haven't even picked up. You can listen to the Constant Writers podcast, you can sign up to my newsletter, you can follow me on Letterboxd. All of the links are down below in the description. So go and have a look at that if you're interested. Right, back onto the video. Now I'm talking Richard Bachman here. If by any chance you're not aware of Richard Bachman, so this is the pseudonym that Stephen King used for a few years until he was rumbled. And he put the books Rage, The Long Walk, The Running Man and Road Work out as Richard Bachman, and then put Thinner out. So those first four were paperback originals, and then Thinner got the big hardback release as Richard Bachman because the paperbacks had done well enough. And then somebody realized that Bachman was King and King was Bachman, and the secret was revealed, and that was it. Richard Bachman died of cancer of the pseudonym. And King did the whole Bachman thing partly because back in those days publishers didn't want to put out more than one book by the same author in one calendar year, but also he was curious about how much his own talent was actually worth, and he wanted to see what he could achieve without the Stephen King name and without much promotion, just putting it out there and see if his works could become a word of mouth hit. So that's the kind of Bachman stuff. And if you want to check out any of my 19 reasons to read the Bachman stories, then they are here on this channel. But as I said, what we're doing here is a bit of fantasy, alternative future viewing. And we're picking that sliding doors moment. In 1985, when a bookstore clerk called Steve Brown realized that King was Bachman and revealed it to the world. And we're going to imagine that either that didn't happen or that guy got silenced somehow. So this is my prediction of how I think the rest of Richard Bachman's career would have panned out, using books from Stephen King's bibliography. This will be spoiler free, it's just a bit of fun. Let me know what you think in the comments as well, and let me know if there's any stories out there that you think are actually Bachman. But enough rambling, enough rumbling, enough something bling. Let's start. So in this alternative reality where Thinner remains a Richard Bachman book and not a Stephen King book, well, Richard Bachman's going to come back a couple of years after Thinner with Misery. Now, Misery was originally going to be the next Bachman book, and it was going to have a particularly nasty ending involving murder and using human skin to bind a special edition of a book. Like I said, much nastier. So that's the launch pad for this little fantasy future gazing of mine. Richard Bachman continues and we get Misery, but we don't get it in this format. We get it in a much nastier Bachman format with a really sort of sting in the tail kicker of an ending that absolutely cements Bachman's ability to be one mean motherfucker. So in my alternative 1989, we're going to see Richard Bachman again, this time, now stick with me, in collaboration with Stephen King on The Dark Half, because the sparrows are flying again. Now my thinking for this is, well, originally there were some joke plans to make The Dark Half a collab between King and Bachman. But what I'm thinking in my alternative version of this world timeline is that we've had Thinner, and there are a few people maybe speculating that Backman could be king. And then we have the next version of Misery, and again those rumours keep coming through. So what I think is that King, seeing this as a chance to have a bit of fun with the world, he just goes all in hiding Backman. And he does this basically as a PR stunt, but what it achieves is it makes the rumours go away, because he goes full in, hires an actor to come on the rounds with him and do interviews and do book signings, and sets this person up to be very real, keeps them on a retainer for as long as he wants to keep the Backman name alive, and well, just really dives fully into it. And they do the dark half together specifically because there at this point are going to be so many rumours that King and Backman are the same person. So they collaborate on a story about pseudonyms just to be like, to everyone who is making up those little rumours. So that's where I think Backman would have gone next. So as we plough on in my alternative timeline, we're going to fast forward to 1992. And I think we would see Backman again as the writer behind Geralds Game, which would be released in conjunction with Dolores Claiborne. Now this would be done because The Dark Half as a collab would have been a complete knockout success. So King would then spin it that he and his old pal Dickie are going to write linked novels. They, I don't know, draw something out of the hat. They decide to put a load of weird things in a hat that can be the one connection between the book, and they draw out an eclipse, and that's about it. And they agree on a scene that's going to be flicking between the two books, but other than that, that is their link. So yeah, in my imagined future, they decide on an eclipse somehow. Backman gets Gerald's Game because it's the more brutal, nasty one. King gets Dolores Claiborne because it's the total main one in the main accent and the main dialect. It is much more obviously King, and they release the two as sort of companion novels. And again, it would probably go down well, right? That's where I think it goes next. Now I'm going to fast forward to 1994 in my alternative timeline, and I'm going to suggest that Richard Bachman would put out his first short story collection. Now there's a bunch of stories in Nightmares and Dreamscapes from 1993 that I think would actually be Bachman's collection. So we'll accept that Nightmares and Dreamscapes comes out in 93 as it did, but with a few stories removed. And those stories are going in this Backman collection that I think would have happened. And those stories for the Backman collection are Dolan's Cadillac, Dedication, Sneakers, My Pretty Pony, which actually came from an aborted Backman novel attempt anyway, so that one is definitely a Backman story. Sorry, Right Number, Umney's Last Case, and The Fifth Quarter, which King even notes himself in this is just a Backman story. That is what I think makes up the Richard Bachman short story collection. As to what they call it, I mean, I don't know. Let's just say The Fifth Quarter, because you want to see the rest of this video and I haven't thought about this. So let's just do that and move on, okay? Okay, next up we're going to 1996. And we're doing Richard Bachman, The Regulators, released on the same day as Stephen King Desperation, because by now they've co-authored The Dark Half together. They've done companion novels in Gerald's Game and Dolores Claiborne. So now they're going to be more actively twinned, same sets of characters, put through different lenses. Basically the same as what happened, but without the whole fake death and, oh, I found this, or sorry, Claudia Inez Bachman found this in a trunk somewhere, chortle, chortle, lol, lol, lol. No, this is actually a serious one, and they employ the actor again to go and do all the press rounds and really have some fun with it. So, for the next step, I'm going to imagine that even in my alternative 1999, the accident for Stephen King still happens. And that potentially poses a problem for the Backman thing, because obviously at some point the press are going to start contacting Richard Bachman to say, how's your friend Stephen King? You know, have you seen him? Is he okay? Are you going to do anything for him? So I think what that does is brings forward the release of Blaze, which is a Backman book that King released in 2007, but had been sitting in a drawer for a while. And I think that in this alternative timeline, King would have updated Blaze earlier and kept it in a drawer in case of emergencies. So the way they'd put it out here is that Richard Bachman would put out Blaze under the guise of it being a story he wrote a while ago and has quickly rushed through to try and help his buddy Stephen King, or not even King himself, because King is a multimillionaire, but to raise money for like the main air ambulance or whoever it was that transported King to the hospital, as a way of saying thank you for saving the world's best author. So yeah, I think the accident still happens and it brings forward Blaze, and we get that as a charity fundraiser almost, as the Richard Bachman part of things. And that just buys a bit of time for King as well in terms of his own recovery. So Blaze would be in the drawer as an in case of emergency, and the 99 accident is that emergency. But it's specifically done to raise money for, as I say, the air ambulance or whatever it is. So next up, I think there's going to be a bit of a gap between Bachman books. There's going to be Blaze in 2000 to raise the money, and then I don't think we're going to hear from him until 2005. But I think Bachman's going to get the hard case crime gig, and Bachman is going to write the Colorado Kid, and it will signal a slight change in direction for him, because it's a bit more, what can I say, a bit more pondering, a bit less nasty, although this through a Bachman lens would probably be a little bit nastier anyway. But the pulpiness just seems to work for the Bachman vibe. So yeah, I'm giving the hard case crime gig to Bachman, and I'm saying he makes his comeback in 2005 with the Colorado Kid. And probably doesn't do anywhere near as well as this, but you know, it sort of causes ripples of interest perhaps. So after that, I reckon we then get another Bachman short story collection, say in around 2008, and it's going to pull stories from Just After Sunset, Everything's Eventual, and The Bazaar of Bad Dreams into a Backman collection, and obviously remove them from the King versions. So I reckon that from Everything's Eventual, the Bachman stories we're going to get are The Death of Jack Hamilton, Lunch at the Gotham Cafe, Lucky Quarter, and In the Death Room. Definitely In the Death Room. From Just After Sunset, I reckon the Bachman stories are going to be Rest Stop. It's another story about a pseudonym after all. Maybe that one could be co-written with Stephen King just for extra lols. Mute, and A Very Tight Place, because it's gangster and it's nasty. And then lastly, and this is shifting around with timelines and things, but hey, it's an alternative reality, we can do this. From Bazaar of Bad Dreams, which wouldn't be released until 2015, the stories that we're going to take from here and put in the Backman collection are as follows. Premium Harmony, Bad Little Kid, Morality, and That Bus is Another World. And all of those stories together are going to be the next Backman collection, which let's call it Morality, because that's a good title. So after that, I reckon we jump to 2010 and we get Full Dark No Stars from Richard Bachman. But it won't be called Full Dark No Stars because that is such a King-ism. It'll be called, I don't know, Nasty Bastard or something like that. I haven't thought these titles through, okay? But the 4 stories in here feel like Bachman stories anyway. So let's just lean into it and say that this is Bachman's first novella collection. And of course that'll spark a few more rumours because, hey, doesn't Stephen King like releasing books with 4 novellas in? But the actor is still out there doing the press rounds. King is funding that guy just to the point where that guy's family don't need to work again for the rest of their lives. And he's really just still having fun and leaning in on the Bachman side of things. So there we go. Full Dark No Stars by Richard Bachman, but with a different title. TBC. So next up, 2013, Hard Case Crime again, and it's Joyland, but Richard Bachman's Joyland. And this is Bachman trying to pitch himself as someone who has perhaps a little bit more heart, starting to become a bit more interested in true crime and not just the nasty side of things, but also gets to knuckle down on the nastier parts of this book. Now, what I am going to say is that hard case crime stuff, I still think Stephen King will write later. And the way it will be pitched is that Richard Bachman is going to introduce King to the guys at Hard Case Crime and get that one in the books. But I think Bachman gets to do Joyland in my alternative reality. So, in this alternative reality with Bachman getting interested in true crime, and in the real world with King becoming increasingly interested with writing crime and stuff, I reckon the two of them are going to collaborate again on not just one, not two, but 3 books. Yes, the Mercedes trilogy is going to be a Bachman King collaboration. Mr. Mercedes' Finest Keepers and End of Watch. And they'll basically be the same, but nastier with more gangsters in it. Sounds about right. So by this point, I reckon Stephen King is going to think, I've stretched this as far as I can go. And I'm a bit bored now. So I think King's going to out himself at this point before The Outsider. So The Outsider will still be a Stephen King only book. And the way he will finally retire the Backman name is with Billy Summers. He'll come to Billy Summers in 2021. This book is so reflective on writing and identity anyway, that I think with a couple of tweaks to make it feel more like a Backman one, this one will be pitched as the final lost Backman book, and this will be the one that sends that name off into the sunset. So there you go. That is my prediction for what the continued career of Richard Bachman might have looked like. Okay, there you go. There's just a bit of fun. That's what Richard Bachman's career might have looked like if people hadn't have worked out that he was king. Let me know if there's any other King stories or books that you think fit the Backman mold that could have been woven into this alternative future. And let me know what you think of my choices as well. I'm always happy to hear from you, either in the comments below or over on Instagram where I'm at Dave Musson. You can also find me on Letterboxd, and there's links to my newsletter, the Constant Writers podcast, and my quiz book in the description, all of that kind of stuff. If you're interested at all, do check them out. Next time, we're back on the adaptations, and we've got a whole new decade to go into. So I'll see you for that.